Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast. Steve Carter here, and in association with my good friends at Preaching Today, Food for the Hungry, and Hope International University, I bring you a podcast to help you get better at the craft of teaching and preaching with the hope that our character will always lead the way. If you're like me, you are already thinking about your Easter message. You're looking for that spark, that sense of inspiration. And I just want to invite you to hear a bit of a song. And the song was released on February 24th, and it's called Imagine. It's from one of the writers of the song Promises by Mav City. His name's Carrington Gaines, and he's a part of Forest City Worship. The song's called Imagine. And I'm telling you, the first time I heard it, it was like a spark, something just inside of me. It was like I could see what the Lent season was going to be. I could see what the Good Friday message could be. I could see what Easter was going to be. And I don't know, so some of you, maybe you already got your Easter message done. Fantastic. But if you need a spark, I want you to hear this song just a bit. It's an 8-minute song. Your team could do it. It's throwback to a hymn towards the end of the song. The lyrics just bring you to the foot of the cross. It makes you literally imagine it all up again. And I just wanted you to hear this. You should go download it, go get it, listen to it, get it to your worship pastor, because I think many of you are going to be like, oh my goodness, this is the song of the year. Oh my goodness, this song is something that needs to be part of our lead up for Easter, or maybe even the special during Easter, or maybe what Good Friday is all built around. But give it a listen. Here's a minute clip from Imagine, and then we'll dive into our Crafting Character podcast. Isn't that song just so special? I'm just telling you, it is so special. So go get it. A link will be in the show notes, but check it out. Imagine it's available wherever music can be found. But today, I'm excited. We are going to learn from the one, the only, Ricky Jenkins. Ricky Jenkins is a fourth generation pastor. He is at Southwest Church in Indian Wells, California, which is a gospel-centered, multi-ethnic, intergenerational church that prides itself on its love for Christ, the cross, and discipleship. And I'll tell you what, Ricky is just one of the most fantastic preachers. And he's been in a series, all kind of connected around the rhythms. And he's just one of my favorites to listen to. I love tuning into Pastor Ricky on a regular basis. And he's got this teach he did recently called Move On. And he's walking through a chunk of Ezra. And man, you got to hear the teach. It's just fantastic. But here's a clip, and then we're going to dive into our interview with the one and only Pastor Ricky Jenkins.
Because some of you are listening to this, and you're saying, well, what's wrong with holding on to my past, Ricky? After all, it is my past. What happened to me really did happen to me. It is real. And some of you, even though you may not want to admit it, you're saying to yourself, Ricky, don't you understand that if I hold on to my past, don't you see that this is this mechanism for me that makes sure that what happened in my past can't happen to me again? Ricky, it's for my defense sake. Don't you understand? And I do understand, and I empathize, but don't you understand that you are not your healer? Jesus is. And sometimes we're holding on to things that he wants to heal, and he cannot heal it if it's still in your hands. Here's your problem, though, if you're holding on to the past. Here it is. If you're holding on to your past today, your problem is that the God you serve is always doing something new. That's the text. The text is that Jesus is saying, okay, Israel, you screwed up for like 1,000 years, but I got grace for you, and I'm starting over. Let's get this thing moving, baby. And see, that's the heart of God. God didn't hold us to the past. If there's breath in your body, there's grace for your soul. Isaiah 43:19, behold, I stand and do a new thing. It's this inclination that Jesus is always saying, I'm not going to hold you to your past. So why are you holding to your past? Wake up and let me do something new in your life. And there's a whole group of men who are not going to experience it.
Well, you just heard a clip from a friend of mine, an incredible preacher and teacher and just human, Pastor Ricky Jenkins. He's the lead pastor at Southwest Church. And you just heard a clip from a message he gave from Ezra 3 entitled Move On. Ricky, thanks so much for joining us on the Craft and Character podcast.
Steve, I love you, bro. It's always good being with you, man. And it's just good to see you, dude. And I love the beard.
Oh, dude, thank you. Well, man, give us a little sense of this teach, because I mean, I think, I've been following you probably for the last 5 years. I forget how I first heard of you, but when you ended up moving out to the desert, out, Indian Wells, I started like listening more, and you just have a gift. It's just the easiest way to say it. You have a gift. I watched and marched through, I feel like maybe like 9 months you did on the book of Galatians.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Just like going into it. And, dude, your ability to be so deep, be so thoughtful, be so practical, but like just gospel, like it is just pointing me to the life of Christ. And you're in this new series now called Rhythm, and you just were just chopping up Ezra 3. Give us a little sense what you were doing in this talk.
You've done this longer than me, Steve. So you know how some sermons you preach where, okay, this makes sense. And okay, that's the plan. And okay, let's calendar that. But kind of while you're preaching it, even you as a communicator are thinking, oh, whoa, it's big. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that Ezra 3 was that for me, standard New Year's series, force everyone to be happy. The year started off well kind of series. And I just kind of got to thinking, what are spiritual disciplines that the 2023 culture needs to acquiesce to, right? So some of them are obvious, right? The old school, read your Bible and pray and all this stuff. But then I got to thinking, we've been through so much that if we don't learn through the power of the gospel how to move on from the past, right? So I just got to think, okay, maybe this text. And I was just reminded about Ezra when they're rebuilding the temple.
Yeah.
And young people who had been in captivity, never seen a temple, right? They're like, the foundation is being laid, and they're like, oh, this is awesome, because they just got free. They've never seen this, but the old guys are crying. And because it paled in comparison to what was before. And if that doesn't capture what's happened to us with COVID and with the political fallout, and then just all the crazy swirly stuff like balloons flying over and all that kind of stuff, it's probably a lot of people that are thinking, man, I don't know if it'll ever be as good as what it was. Right. But how God is always a God anew. So, bro, that was kind of what I was thinking behind that sermon. You just don't know, though, until you're in it with God's people. Right. Because a sermon is a moment in history.
Yes.
Sermon is a moment in history where there's exchange between heaven and earth. That's what a sermon is. And, bro, it was historic. What I was feeling, what I was sensing, it became not just a sermon to preach to people, but it became somewhat of a moniker that needs to be read over my soul and over my spirit in this season, right? So, dude, that's kind of what the thought was. Hopefully it went well. Hopefully the people enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah. Well, but speak to that. You're talking about your just little definition of this sermon.
Yeah.
It's a moment in history. Talk more about that, because
I've always felt like a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends, a lot of seminarians, a lot of professors, a lot of preachers are underwhelmed when it comes to their expectation of what preaching is.
ooh,
Now, I think the inverse of that is true too, right? There's some who are overwhelmed and just overinflated, and it's just like, not all that either.
yeah, yeah,
But I feel by and large, most of us have too low an expectation for what needs to happen when the text is expounded upon. And so, Crawford Larish used to always say it was a moment in history. And as I've developed and as I've grown, as I've shared, I've kind of added that it's this moment in history where there's an exchange between heaven and earth, right? And that's just being cliche and somewhat metaphoric. But I think the whole idea is that, man, there ought to be this expectation that God is going to do something historic in somebody's life and in the life of this church and this moment and this people and this moment of time. Somebody's going to walk out here and they will always remember that date, that church, what the songs were, what the preacher said, and what the Spirit made them to feel in that moment. And I don't think we bring enough of that to our expectations and to the fore when we preach. So that's what I'm thinking when I'm preaching. That's what I'm feeling. That's what I'm praying about. That doesn't mean every sermon's going to be a bell ringer, right? Yeah. Just maybe a double, may just get on base, right? But man, I'm thinking about it that way. I'm praying about it that way. I'm expecting it to be that for somebody in that room or somebody online when they're listening to that sermon, bro. So it's gotta be that, or else I think we're missing the potential what true gospel-centered preaching really is, man. So anyways, that's what I think.
No. I think it's interesting because, we were chopping just a second ago, and I've been listening to your stuff and for the last couple of years, and I was just trying to hear from you, like, hey, what's a message, and I mentioned Make War, which was in that series, and you're like, oh, the people love that. But then you said Move On, the one that we just listened to, like it did something in you.
Yeah.
Talk about the difference, because in a sense of this moment in history with an exchange between heaven and humanity.
Yeah.
That Make War, man, you could feel that.
Yeah.
But like the way that you talked about what happened in Ezra 3 for you,
yeah,
it was like preaching to yourself.
Totally, dude. Totally. And almost kind of, I've always thought that I won't say a preacher, but I will say a pastor ought to be at where his or her people are going. Right? Like a communicator of the gospel ought to be at. It doesn't mean we're far ahead, right?
Yeah.
Just we're ahead, right? Yeah. Like God has given us this very sanctioned, ordained, God-graced position where our people are here, but we're there and the Spirit's somewhere there. Doesn't mean we're better, just means that's where we're at.
Right.
And I just feel like gospel preaching from a pastor's heart ought to be that. I'm projecting where you guys are going to be, that you're not just yet, that I've been getting to all week. And so for me, it was the inverse with that move, Move On. I just felt like, no, this is where I'm at. I feel like the Spirit is teaching me how to not bow down to the gods of attendance from 2019.
Ooh.
And the God of budget flow from 2019. And the God of, you know what I'm trying to say, right? Like the biggest problem was strategic planning. The biggest problem was, okay, what's my 3 overarching objectives this year? The biggest problem was, how are we going to get enough people at Christmas and Easter? Now my biggest problem is, okay, are we going to be centered on the gospel in these paradigmatic shifting times faced by our culture? And just like the people in Ezra, bro, I'm just feeling as I'm preaching, they're just like looking at what God's doing now with a bit of woe and sadness and loss, because they can remember how it used to look.
Yeah.
Although that second temple in Ezra 3, that was the temple where Christ would actually minister. The former one was bigger, but bigger doesn't mean better. And I'm writing it. I've written the sermon. And it's just like, bigger is not better, blah, blah, blah. But while I'm preaching it, it's just as it were the Spirit was saying, this is for you.
Wow.
This is you. I want you to stop looking at this temple as a lesser temple.
Mm.
It's not better, Ricky. And wake up to that. Smell that coffee, because you're gonna have to live there now so your people can get there later. And it was just, I felt like God used a sermon he called me to preach to pastor me. He always does.
Yeah.
But that was one where I was just like, okay, this is something I tell myself every day.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, dude?
That dude, it really that really resonates. And I think it's funny. I was speaking at an for like a week for the Salvation Army and a lot of their officers, and I felt like really like out of nowhere to preach on Nehemiah. And I preached like one-offs on Nehemiah, but never. And so I just felt like it. But what hit me was Nehemiah 8. And it was when I kept just asking this question: why did this matter so much to Nehemiah? Why did this matter? Why was it so important? And then all of a sudden you have in Nehemiah 8, Ezra gets up and reads.
Yes, that's rich.
And like the whole people are like weeping.
That's right.
Of the text. And it like, it hit me. It was like, oh my goodness. Like, was this what Nehemiah saw? Like, we make it about the wall. We make it about like a leadership plan, strategic planning, and like he like da 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 da. But like the visual of just him as this was 52 days worth that people would hear my man Ezra read the text out loud. You know, like it just, so when you said Ezra and I like you were teaching on Move On, like I remember like it just like that, it just was all just hitting in a spot for me. But I'm curious because when you teach, you know, like I can go back and I can tell you different messages in Galatians that you taught. You're just a master of the craft. But there's also these moments where I'm like, he has, I know, like a massive iPad on his table that I know that I see. Typically sometime a water bottle. But like you're preaching, you got this. But then there's these places where I'm like, I'm not saying it's improvising.
Yeah, sure.
But you've like I think it was like the second teach in Galatians. You were talking about you know, a different gospel, and you use the two Greek words. I can't remember them. You're smarter than me, but like you then you quote Keller, if I remember right. And then you're like, oh, yeah, this was a line, if I remember it. If you have to edit it, it's not it. And like, you just went on, and I was like, that wasn't in his notes.
Yeah.
Like he just like, and I just was like, he knows his teach and his stuff so well.
Yeah.
That you are so free in the moment.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the pieces that I so respect about your teach, because it's so a part of you, but it's like you're so a part of the room and what the Spirit's doing that you have this level of freedom that doesn't dismiss what you prepped for and what you have.
Sure.
I don't like, how do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably a big fat, I don't know. But you know, it's more of a hindsight perspective, right, Steve? Right? Yeah. Like, I don't think 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I went into it with that kind of thought process that, yeah, that's how I want to show up. And that's what I'm called and gifted to do. Right. So, you know, me and you've been doing this a while. So now we've captured what God has done and we know how to explain it.
Yes.
So for me, you know, some of that is my tradition growing up in the Black church, which leaned heavily into the text, but also leaned heavily into the room, where I'm bringing this text, this center, right? This steadfastness, this rock to bear upon, you know, vessels, right? That are not rocks, that are fluid. And, you know, how do you marry that together? And it's just a tradition that allowed for a little bit of spontaneity and expressivism. So some of it's tradition, but more so it's just kind of, you know, when you have a perspective that a sermon is a moment in history, if it's changing history, then I can't completely 100% prepare for it.
Yeah.
And I just come to a preaching event understanding that I'm bringing the 5 loaves and 2 fish. But Jesus is going to multiply it however he wants to, whenever he wants to. And I'm subject to that, right? So I've always explained it this way to young preachers. I always say, when you're a young preacher, you're always preaching more to the sermon than to the people, right? Young preachers like, I just got to get this sermon out.
Yeah.
Got to get this sermon out, A, B, C points, 3 points in poem, and I'm going to get it there, when all the while there's people out there that we sometimes forget to think about. And so for me, it's always making sure the people win more than the sermon.
Yep.
And so it's like Andy Stanley used to say, I'd rather memorize half of this and communicate it clearly and compellingly than get all of it and not communicate it clearly and compellingly. So some of that's in my brain too. So tradition, the whole sermon, the people are more important than the sermon piece. The third piece, though, is this: as far as my process, Steve, I've always felt like it's best to use a metaphor of classical music versus jazz.
Okay.
Through the week, I'm preparing classical music that has these guidelines and rules and keys that are stanched, right? They should not be moved because all of these pieces have to come together to present this music. I prepare classically, but I present in jazz.
Man.
So that's what I'm thinking. I don't know what that means to others that are listening, but that's definitely what's going on in my soul, that there are rules, there are guidelines, there are rhythms that every one of us have as communicators. And so I'm just following those rules throughout the week. And I'm in the text all day Tuesday and Wednesday. Okay, let me meet with my team and see what they think about this text. Let me consult a commentary that afternoon if I need to. Thursday, a lot of prayer, writing out the outline, wrestling, then write out a finished manuscript word for word. Then Friday, all day, I'm trying to house it. But when I preach it, I'm just thinking the Spirit may want to change key.
Yeah.
The Spirit may want a crescendo here while I prepare to kind of fade to black. And so I've just been sensitive to that, to where I'm so comfortable with the classical that I can trust the jazz when the Spirit wants to bring it.
Wow.
And so that's it. I hope those metaphors stick. I hope they make some sense, but that's what I'm feeling in those moments. And I found that the Lord's going to mostly use that classical, right? Like that's what's feeding our people. That's what's giving them the nutrients they need, the stability. But boy, when he does the jazz, right? Like it's more memorable, right? It is a lot of times more fun. Sometimes it's more emotive, right? It brings me into what the Spirit has inspired in that text emotionally.
Yeah.
So yeah, dude, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm feeling in those moments.
It's amazing because when you preach, there's a level of expectancy and dependency, and they're held in healthy tension every time I hear you teach and preach, and obviously underneath that is it's just biblical, it's gospel, it's like you're taking me into context, language, all this stuff. It's genius. Sure. But there's this expectancy and dependency, and I think if you don't. We often want that for our people, but we don't demonstrate it from the platform.
So true.
And then, but it's like when I can see in someone doing that, it's like that's when it actually becomes a moment in history, because you're like, I remember that moment. That went off. That's when the piano came in and that went on a little run, in the jazz.
That's it.
And I think, man, is that homegrown Mississippi? Is that where just kind of is that been something that, man, you just almost have to jump out of the nest and you learn it? I think to give credit to my forebears, right? For sure, I've seen that modeled. I'm a fourth generation pastor. Yeah.
So for sure, I've seen that modeled since I was a boy. But you know how it is, bro, when we're growing up, you can know something that you still don't believe.
Ooh, that's good.
And so I'm guilty of that truth when it comes to those dependencies, right? And those expectations of the Spirit and those moments of the preaching event, right? To where just because I know God's going to do something doesn't mean I believe it in that moment. That had to be that had to be matured in my soul. It still is, by the way.
Yeah.
That had to be developed in my heart and in my mind. And like my grandfather used to always say, it takes preaching to make a preacher, right? So you just had to, man, crap. I got a single today, but
Yeah.
I would have just trusted what he was trying to veer me off just a little bit. If I would have just trusted that, I knew it was there, but I was afraid. Yet God still used the words of a donkey to bless his congregation, right? So I think some of that too is just trial and error in preaching, to realize, to get comfortable in those spaces where I don't know where God's going, but I trust where God's going because we've done this before. We've been here before. He's going to use this moment. And again, to your point, right? We're not talking about 35% of the sermon. We're not talking about 50%. We're talking about those one or two moments.
Yep.
I think every Sunday where the Spirit, I recorded today, right? For this weekend, just recorded an hour ago. And, manuscript's all done, finished the last point, supposed to just encourage everyone to pray. The Spirit brings to me this old Christian rap song from 1998 that I force my boys to listen to all the time, called Prayed Up. And so I'm just going through the motions all of a sudden about how we're always singing songs, prayed up, prayed up, prayed up. And I'm going through the songs. My camera guys are looking at me like, what is happening right now? Because they got the manuscript, they're like, this ain't, and I'm just prayed up, prayed up, prayed up. And I've learned that as long as I'm prayed up, the world can't bring me down.
Yeah.
Right. Steve, you and me are not that good.
Yeah, not that good.
That's a God thing in those moments. And if you're listening, learn that you're not that good, to sort of let God be that good in you and through you when you preach. I think is what I want our people to hear.
Man, that's amazing. This is like what you bring is a healthy humility, but a more greater authority in the text and a more greater authority in the gospel and in the way of Christ. And I'm curious for you. You talked about the classical. It's like you're gonna get a little moment of jazz, and you got your classical, and you walk through a little bit of your schedule. But give me more like classical rules of preaching engagement with Ricky Jenkins. Like what are some other, when you think through and you're like, man, this is just some of how I almost go after this moment in history, this exchange between God and humanity. Talk about that.
Sure, man. Well, it's all, mental, spiritual, emotional, is all woven together.
Yeah.
So some things I wouldn't delve into right are there. And I think I'd encourage anybody listening, right, that consider the whole man or the whole woman, right? Like physicality matters, diet matters, how your rest rhythms matter, your health and your all that good stuff. So for me, man, just like a typical approach to a week of preaching, 9 times out of 10, I'm in a series, so I'm already a little familiar with the lay of the land. I've already kind of got a calendar out, so it's in my brain, and I'm thinking, okay, what I'm going to do with that. I take a good Sabbath every Monday. I burned out at 28, and I know what it means to not. I know what it means to find your identity in your work. And so a strong Sabbath on the golf course, shanking balls left and right, is going to be a better sermon, right? Yeah. So nothing on Monday. Tuesday morning, drop the kids off. I'm just in the passage, opening up God's word. I ask him to give me a word. Every Tuesday I pray, will you give me a word for your church? Will you give me a word for my life? Will you give me a word for my marriage? Will you give me a word for my kids? And will you give me a word for the disciples, these 14 men that I'm discipling who are in my small group? That's the prayer, Steve. I pray every Tuesday. And I'm here to bear witness that my Father has never not answered that prayer, not one time. And so be encouraged, brother and sister that's working on your craft. My God has never not answered that prayer. And 30 years of salvation, 25 years of preaching, he's never not answered that prayer. So I read the text in old school Howard Hendricks, bro. Like I read it 6-7 times, try to read it in 2 or 3 different versions. I'm making some observations. I'm a memorized by writing guy. Yeah. So even though the notes app is there, I don't like to type it. I've got my little notes and I just like to write and jot, and I house the text. And usually by the end of, I got this from Kenton B. Shore.
Yeah.
9 weeks out of 10, at the end of the day, Tuesday, I can preach that message, albeit terribly. I can preach it by the end of the day.
Yep.
Won't have a polished intro, right? But it'll have the 3 points in the poem that if hell broke loose on a Wednesday and pastors got to do what pastors got to do, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I've carried. Wednesday morning, I got this from John Calvin and his company of pastors. Every Friday morning, they got together and just would preach to each other and talk about God's word. We do that with our team here. Whosoever will, they may come, and we talk about the text. I tell them where I'm going, but then I just shut my mouth and listen because I've missed something, and I hear it. And after Wednesday morning, Steve, I believe not only can I preach the sermon, but it'd be good. So by Wednesday morning, just because I've met with my team, I believe this is going to be good because their perspectives have been brought to bear. Wednesday, I'm meeting all day, can't barely even touch it. Thursday, the team has very graciously respected the fact, don't talk to Ricky. That's that day, right? Any other day, walk in anytime you want to. I'm wrestling and I'm trying to go home with a word for word, 2,000 word, 4 pages, Times New Roman font, 1.5 spacing or 1.5 spacing, manuscript word for word. And then Friday morning, I come to the office. I record every Friday at 11. And Brian Loritz taught me 20 years ago, spend as much time on presentation as you do preparation.
That's right.
So I'm trying to make sure that when I preach, I don't need to depend on notes. I may glance at them, but I don't need them, as it were. And that's my rhythm, man. That's my classical that I bring to the table on Sundays.
Dude, that's so good. You know, Kenton, I mean, just a legend, but, you know, Kenton would often, for any of you listening, he'd say, if you had to preach it tonight, what would you say? If you had and I think anytime you're in that preparation and you're doing your sermon notes, like to keep asking, if I had to preach this message tonight, what sticks out? What would I say? You know, so that's so good. Ricky, one of the things that you do that I feel like is unique post kind of COVID reality is your team, like that you said, films on Friday, and then you guys kind of put this like studio audience or studio background kind of you're preaching, and then you guys will do your service and it's like in room, but like online it's different. I talk about that and talk about the why behind that. And then also, like, what's amazing is your eye contact when you teach on Friday at 11, dude, it's phenomenal. Like I wouldn't have thought you manuscripted one, every word, because even at Friday at 11, like your eye contact, like every one of you listening, you should just go and watch, because the sermon and the way that he communicates with his eyes, like you could speak to a camera and you could speak through a camera, bro. You speak through a camera, which is remarkable. But just give us a little bit the behind the scenes, like philosophy for why you guys do it this way.
Yeah, sure. Well, every church is different, and a lot of that is us leaning into our context, and a lot of that is in an embrace of this is our best guess at what is working for it now. Yeah, and we've just kind of decided that we'll see what's happening next month and everything like everything else in COVID, right? So I record every Friday, 11 o'clock, and we've kind of bifurcated the experiences whereby we've said, okay, online, we're going to look at it evangelistically. Weekends, we're going to look at pastorally. And so the whole idea is that the recording is just going to YouTube. And the reason I'm still recording, the reason why I'm still doing something where I'm looking into people's eyes is to honor the people that we won over amidst the pandemic, who've never been here, right? Could care less about me making jokes about context they can't possibly understand about a desert, right? They're just used to Ricky for a year and a half was just doing this.
Yeah.
And there's so many of them, just like it is at your church and everywhere else, that we just felt like we can't leave their experience behind. So that was part of it. But I want everybody to hear this too, unapologetically. The other side of it, Steve, is your second sermon is always your best. Period. So the second time you preach it is always the best time you preach it. And we got to thinking, we had 4 services before the pandemic. We're down to 2 now, Sundays at 9 and 11, used to have a Saturday night. I've got little kids, and the pandemic taught me that I want them to love their daddy and know their daddy. And that Saturday night was in the way.
Yes,
So
right.
unless there's like 20,000 people that show up next month, right? We've decided that we're going to bless our staff and stay away from Saturdays, at least until my kids are driving age and mom and daddy are not popular anymore. That's some of the thoughts. We hope that. We'll see what God does. If you want to make God out telling your plans. But my point is this. I just learned that Saturday night service, my brain turns on at 10 a.m. It doesn't matter if I'm at a soccer game. Doesn't matter if we're at breakfast. I'm looking through my children.
Yep.
Thinking about that sermon that night.
Yep.
And me recording it, it's 2 or 3 staff guys' time for an hour. But Camden gets a dad on the weekend.
Wow.
And to be quite honest, Southwest gets a non-stressed out pastor before that 9 o'clock. And we've just found that the fruit of that to be sweeter than whatever it was before. So that's some of the technological, methodological approach, but a lot of it is us unapologetically taking care of us to the point where it's just like, you know what, big, again, Ezra 3, bigger doesn't necessarily mean better, right?
That's right.
So I tell everybody, hey, how's your church? Is it smaller like it was before pandemic? Like we ask everybody else. And of course, it's all that. And I'll say this, we are smaller, but purer.
Wow.
And I take pure, it tastes better, it feels better, it's sweeter, and it's making more impact.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of where we're at. We'll go to a live audience on the other side of Easter, or recording it in front of people just to kind of bring to bear some of that spontaneity. But we're going to train those audiences that Ricky's not looking at you. You are here for the people that we're witnessing to. So this is an act of your evangelistic expression, right? So we'll see how it goes, bro. That's what we're doing.
Dude. Well, even for, anyone who's just tuning in, you got to go check it out, because even the way that they do is really kind of unique, because it's not just like, hey, we just cut to a room and he teaches. He does like he or whoever's teaching from their staff will do like a 30-second, and then it goes into like a little bit of a bumper, just reminding you who Southwest is.
Bro, you know us well.
Bro, I'm just saying, from like, you feel the evangelistic side, bro. Like I listen to you, man. I love listening to you. So like you have that sense, and then it like right back in, but it's a cool kind of like the ways that you have just tried to take that space. And from someone who, grew up in Southern California, who knows of Indian Wells, like I just thought, man, I assumed from the outside, 1, it felt evangelistic. 2, that you have a whole bunch of snowbirds from Illinois who come out for 6 months and then they're gone, like, because like out to where you are. And it was like, oh, I wonder how much is like that. When you said the desert context, knowing that context, like, do you guys find this time of year, a kind of a ballooning, growing? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's just we're in a what's called a retirement community. So think Naples, Florida, Park City, Utah, right? The average home in the Coachella Valley is a second home of a Canadian. Yeah. Right? The average home, like I live in a neighborhood with 54 homes, because it's nothing but gated communities. Yeah. 54 houses, 27 of them are from Canada. It's the average home in the desert. And so we are what we call ourselves desert rats, which means you live here year round. But then there's the snowbird from Madison, Wisconsin, Chicago, Illinois, Edmonton, Alberta, Vancouver, Canada, and the list goes on. What happened in the pandemic, though, Steve, is that these folks who by and large are at some small Lutheran church or this little Anglican church and love coming to this big box of an evangelical, everybody's hands are lifted kind of place, no liturgy at all. So for them, it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm being stretched. And they take that energy back home. Well, in the pandemic, hardly none of their little churches, right, were online. And so they became year-rounders with us through the online piece that happened. To answer your question, yeah, man, we are a church that, by and large, we have our bulk of the people year-round, but around October, we go up a little bit attendance-wise, but around February, which is now, it's packed. There's not enough chairs, right? And so it's just crazy. It brings a lot of excitement to us because these folks are seeing something called a yellow sun. So they're just thrilled, and they bring that energy to us, and our economy exists, right? Because these people come down. And so there's not a love-hate thing. 9 out of 10 people at my church have a job and have a means because these people come to our town. And so there's love and there's grace and there's acceptance. And so it's a real sweet thing, dude. It's unique. It makes it hard to raise money, but that's okay. It is a beautiful thing.
One of the other things that I respect about you, I feel like you have a real heart for formation, and I find myself just like constantly, and again, the gospel, the Christ, like all of the way that you'll teach, you can do this through Galatians, just like the way you walk through this stuff. But there is a sense of a spiritual disciplines formation that just it often doesn't I don't find it with very many charismatic voices. You know what I mean? That can move a room. So like you hold this like high authority of the text. You hold this deep expectancy, dependency on the Spirit. And yet you bring this like almost practical, formational, your cousin and I were talking like recently, and he was like, dude, what Ricky does with spiritual, and I was like, I know, just like the formation side. It's like a uniqueness of doing these three pieces really, really well. I sometimes see people who do the text and formation well. Sometimes I see people who do the text and spirit well. But to do these three, I think it's really, really unique to your sound and gifting. Was that something that kind of came, has always been true? Or has that been something like, man, the emergence over the last like 15 years that you were like, dude, I read some stuff and it just got me? Is it out of the burnout? What was it?
Yeah, man. First of all, I'm very humbled, man, at your perception. I don't think about myself that way, and it's just encouraging, right?
And I could be wrong if I'm saying something that you're like, Steve, this is a terrible Tony Romo breakdown of my teeth. You know what I mean?
Tony Romo, that's hilarious. Well, I will say this. There's a big part of my soul that's trying to be like my great grandfather.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, he was just kind of had a prophetic gift and not a Bible thumper, right? But definitely lived. This is the word of truth. This is what you need, right? And then there was my grandfather, who is the most devout person I've ever known, as far as how he devoted himself before the Lord. 8th grade education, but my grandfather probably read his Bible. I wouldn't be surprised if my grandfather's read his Bible 100 times. Knew the scripture. I remember his first visit here to the desert, right out of Pearl, Mississippi, and we're just driving around, and he's just enthralled by mountains, right? The mountains in the desert are on top of you. They're like I'm looking at it's right there, right? Like right there, the mountain. And the old man is quoting Steve seemingly every passage in the Bible that includes a mountain. So he's just in the back seat. He's just like, yeah, before the mountains were brought forth, ever thou have. He's just back to quote scripture to himself. And so just prayer and fasting, and that's who he was. And then, man, I love my daddy, who is, there's no better room reader than Richard Jenkins Sr., a preacher in Indianola, Mississippi, the world may never hear of. But to watch Daddy coming up, how he was so sensitive to God's voice and God's spirit. And Dad kind of had a prophetic edge to him too. Dad kind of knew where to change a sermon. Like he was a king of sermon changes. I was going to preach this, but the Lord is saying this. And he was, so I don't know, just hearing your question, immediately I just thought of my fathers and how I saw them show up. Great granddad with that word, granddad with just that devoted rhythm of life, that he had a personal relationship with Jesus, right? Than just dad and that spontaneity. It's just germane. It's just natural to him. So I wouldn't have said that I do that. I wouldn't have said I was trying to do that. Just hearing your question, I was like, well, okay, I know what you're saying. I see that. I know I didn't do that. So okay, I think that's dad. I think that's granddad. I think that's great granddad.
So that's so the legacy, the power of that is so beautiful. I'm sitting down with Camden and I say, hey,
make me cry.
This is what your dad says about your great granddad and your great granddad and your grandpa.
Yeah.
Camden, what would you say about your dad?
Wow. Well, that struck up the tear, bro. So one of my prayers in my life, Steve, and it's the reason I declare that truth when I read the text every Sunday. I read from the greatest book ever written, and I bear witness this day. All of its words are true. Every time I open God's words, that's my kind of my doxology, right? That's what I declare. I almost tear up every Sunday when I say it because I feel like that's the calling of my life. And I've told April this, and I tell my congregation this: if the Lord allows me to die softly, where everyone's gathered around, I want to be able to hand this book over to Camden and say, "Here you go."
Oh, I'm crying.
I kept it intact. Your turn. So that's what my prayer is, that my boy would say that Daddy is handing down this book to me, and then someday it'll be my turn. The kids are now old enough to make fun of their dad preaching. So now I'm watching them run around the house and say, you believe to believe the gospel. And then they come up to me and say, preach the gospel, Ricky. What in the world is happening? But I think Camden today would say, in his own 8-year-old way, and the words are passion, feeling. But I hope he'll be able to say, that man really did believe this. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he'll be able to translate, right, the nuance of historicity and context and grammar. But I hope, man, if all he could say is that he believed it.
Wow.
And he believed it such that I believe I'm supposed to believe it too. That's all I want. That's all I want. And that's all we want for our people, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's what Bart used to say, right? Like Bart used to have his company of preachers, and he would say, young men, the reason they keep coming back is to see if you still believe it. And I've been doing this now for 20 years, and that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. How shall they hear without a preacher?
And talk about that, because I think, part of this is, you're one of the best at your craft. And, we talked earlier about, whatever post-COVID is in the last few years, as we were talking about moving on and Ezra 3 and, just all of whether civil unrest, political, just all of it. And that still continues, and it will continue in 2024 and
sure.
all the stuff that's happening. Sure. And yet you do have people who keep coming back to see if you believe it. Ray Johnston always talks about, the greatest gift you can give yourself is encouraging yourself. It's like that's what like a leader's job has to just keep encouraging your own spirit and self. How have you, post a 28-year-old burnout, how have you, in the midst of just the uniqueness of the last few years, continued to hold on and believe that? When I'm sure it was easy in some ways, and sometimes was really hard, like how?
It's definitely a dance, right? I think God uses peacetime and wartime, right, to sanctify us and all that good stuff. And just like you, and I'm sure everybody listening, the pandemic was wartime. And I almost 2 years ago to the day, Steve, was thinking about writing my letter of resignation.
Wow.
and I just couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
You know, the weight of being the one who's the encourager, who needed to be probably more encouraged than I ever had before, right?
Yeah.
With the weight of all the varying expectations our sheep were going through, you know? And, I don't think any pastor is saying, I did everything right. Everything I did in the pandemic was perfect. I don't think anybody's saying that. Lord knows I'm not. But just the weight of what it felt like to not be liked.
Yeah.
And having to deal with that idol in the soul, coupled with just honestly, as if I can be a little selfish, being a black brother amidst the George Floyd moment in a church that is a valley that's 2% African American. So I had many of our people empathizing with me, but no one really understands it, right? And questioning, am I really the one that can truly authentically lead this congregation if this is going to be the new normal? Is that fair to them? Is that fair to me?
Yeah, totally.
Right. So all those weights, but my point is this, bro. When it got that hard, the thing that centered me in April, the thing that reconciled us to, nope, we're just going to roll up our sleeves and keep going. In fact, I remember we were just talking about leaving, and I was talking about writing my letter, because it's just too heavy. But I'm just talking to April about it. But I was like, well, I may as well start praying. And I says, God, this is something that's on my heart. And it was almost instantaneously, the Spirit was like, that's not me. I didn't tell you to do that. So whatever this is, stop it. It's just like, oh, okay. But my point being, preacher listening to this podcast today, do not let go of the virtue of calling. You can leave something that's not a calling. You can quit on something that's not a calling. In fact, you should. But what kept me was, I know 5 years ago when this sweet church brought me out here, I knew that the bush was on fire and wasn't burning.
Yeah.
And I heard in my soul the voice of God saying, this is where I want you to serve. And I want you to love on these people as best you can. Would you do that for me? I knew that was the call. And I guess that's my encouragement to anyone here. If you're called, you can.
Yeah.
And if you're not called, it's okay not to. and so, there's all nuance in there, right? Like how God did that, how God showed up. But I think if it's not centered on the fact that, yes, I am called to do this for such a time as this, we're already kind of, sailing against the wind, as it were. I think outside of that is friends like you and dads like Kenton B. Shore, Ray Johnston, Tom Mercer, and so many others who have shepherded me that give me license to call them up. So I want to brag on Kenton and just making sure pastors are pastored. You know Kenton, I know Kenton. He is my pastor. He's me and April's pastor. I'm sitting in my office. I mean, this is a guy who built one of the more influential churches in America, right?
Yep.
13, 14,000, whatever Mariners is, retired now, but still saging like crazy. This guy who shouldn't have time for me makes time to come to this office. He refuses to meet me at a restaurant because he's like, you're too busy. You don't have time to go to a restaurant. That's a 10-minute drive there, 10-minute drive back. 3 or 4 people are going to stop you and talk to you. Oh, you're an idiot. Don't ever meet someone here. I'll come to your office. And he'll sit on that couch.
Yeah.
I'll tell him what the problem is. He'll say, yeah, you're an idiot, but that's okay. This is what you do.
Yep.
And then he'll stand up. He'll stand up, Steve, and he'll tear up with tears down his eyes, pointing his face at his finger, saying, you're going to be okay, buddy. You're going to you're going to be fine.
Yep.
That's how I do it.
Yeah, dude. That's so good. Two last questions.
Sure.
And Kenton, you're so spot on. I mean, he is a process genius. And he just he's unbelievable the way his mind works. Unbelievable. And arguably has led one of the best successions that nobody ever talks about. I'm
begging him to write the book.
Oh my goodness.
Eric should write the book.
Right. I mean, the fact that he did a pastoral class with 500 people and basically said, I need you to commit to the next person for 3 years financially, volunteer, serving, attending. After 3 years, if you don't like the guy, if I'm fine, whatever, but I need you to do this for 3. They all signed. I mean, just like the stuff that he thought through to set Eric up so that Eric could be Eric. I mean, just you sit there and you go, gosh, like what that could be for so many others. Anyways, all I say, learn from Kent B. Shore. That's beautiful.
Unreal.
You said something earlier that where Southwest is today, there's a purity. There's a purified. It's smaller in some ways, but there's this purity. In September of 2020, you couldn't see that. Now that you can see that, does not take away any of the feelings of what you were going through and processing through. I know in your life, knowing you've had other moments in that where you can look back and go, gosh, like hindsight's 2020, as Swindoll says. Like you have these moments where you're like, oh gosh, like great is thy faithfulness. Like God's so faithful, so steadfast. Yeah. To hear you so like I was ready, the Spirit met me, but then to hear you have that clear, clean vision of this beautiful, purified bride in process of Southwest. How do you hold on to that? Like, how do you categorize those kinds of stories in your life? Are they like, and I just carry these faiths that are like altars, they're like stone, like what, how do you make sense? Because there are going to be more tricky times, but like, how do you hold those as a pastor, as a man, in such uncertainty? How do you categorize that?
Yeah, such a good question, man. You should think about having a podcast. That's a great question. And for me, I don't know how this resonates with others. I don't know of many truths, many marquee moments, many kind of like, okay, this is a life-altering lesson or experience that I learned. Steve, I can't think of one I haven't preached through.
Wow.
Now, that's just me. It's just how I'm wired. I don't know of any aha that I haven't preached a sermon on. I don't know any life-changing moment or crux or tension that even if it was 2 years later that I don't know of anything. And it's something that cements it in my spirit and my soul. Don't get me wrong, when I'm in it, right? April teaches me something about marriage. Steve teaches me something about preaching. Don't get me wrong. I write it down and I, codify it and it's there, but it's something that about preaching it that cements it.
Yes.
It's something about the witness or the testimony of preaching it that in my brain guarantees the fact that Satan will never take it away. So that's just who I am, right? I don't know how to not have an experience with God vicariously with another person or in a lesson I learned from a book. I don't know how to make it a part of me until it happens in the preaching event. And I guess that's from a desire to share it.
Yeah.
It happens one-on-one and interactions and stuff. But bro, for me, until those moments at the end of most every sermon when I walk from the pulpit and I come down with our people, because I love that. I just love being close to them. And I love what God's doing. I love people. I love looking at them while God's changing them.
Yeah.
I love being the preacher who's being the vessel for the communication, but it's really the Spirit. I almost feel like I'm on the pews with them while the Spirit's talking to them. So I like to be close to them and say, you're going to be all right with this. It's something about that makes it full circle.
Yeah.
It becomes categorized. It becomes organized. It becomes a part of the system.
Yeah.
Right, of my soul, of what God's doing in Ricky Jenkins. So, man, that's how I think about that.
Dude, that's so beautiful though. If like, again, think about this for anyone who's listening. Earlier in the podcast, you heard Ricky, he just described it almost being like one step ahead of his people often. And that a sermon from Crawford Leroy, its wisdom is that it's a moment in history. Ricky adds brilliantly, this exchange between heaven and humanity. Like there's this something, but the way that you just described it is for me, the word that kept coming up is, yes, it's a moment in history, but there are some sermons that are a revelation.
That's right.
Of a moment in history, and like that piece of like, which is allow that one step ahead. This is, so bro, you've just given me so much to think about. What I love doing the podcast for me is it just like, man, I want to preach. I want to like, it makes me want like, just, I love the way you think. I've started ending my podcast with just a simple question. And it's basically like, we all, if we think about it from basketball, if we think about, we all got parts of our game that we love. There's parts of our game that we're like working on right now.
Sure.
What part of the preaching, from prep to preach to evaluation that you're like, it's just something for me. I got to give a little bit more attention to.
What a great question. Oh, I love that question. And I know the answer. It's immediately, I know what comes to mind. I'm working on it's somewhat ancillary, kind of. It's not a major feature of preaching, but I'll use a metaphor. It's tying the bow. And what I mean by that is I'm learning, like I'm very story formed in my preaching, very illustrative, right? 9 out of 10 sermons, I'm going to open with a story or a moment in history, right? Just to set up an epic moment to give people a reason to want to keep listening. So that's kind of how I'm wired. I don't always do it, but most of the times I'm starting off in 1954. All the things. And I'm learning, for years now, I found a line in that opening introduction that cements or captures what this text is about, which is the reason why. So I found I just did it last Sunday. So last Sunday I tell this story about, anyways, the whole idea is celebrate, learn how to party, learn how God can use the most rudimentary routines of your life to show God's kindness and love in and through you, blah, blah, blah. And the opening story is about this guy named Leroy, 1960s Memphis, who worked at this old textile mill, worked for a curmudgeon of a guy. And every day he'd stop by his desk and say, Mr. Barnes, what you need is Jesus. Have a nice day. And folks are just laughing because he said it every day. And I'm just, Mr. Barnes, what you need is Jesus. Now have a nice day. Well, he ends up leading Mr. Barnes to Jesus. Mr. Barnes becomes a pastor. And they said that every day he would close his service and say, Tullahoma Baptist Church, what you need is Jesus. Now have a nice day. And everybody laughed and it was sweet. Well, I preach a 40-minute sermon. Well, last Sunday, and this is what's been happening the last year that I'm trying to work on. And it just came up to me in the moment. But I'm closing the sermon. Everybody's moved. Praise Jesus. Good day of exposition. I do the ironic blessing to close every, Lord bless you, keep you, boy. So I said, one more thing, y'all. Southwest Church, what you need is Jesus. Now have a nice day. So tying the bow, where what got them into it ushers them away from it so they can become it in their lives. And I'm just encouraging the preachers listening. You're listening to this because you're in love with words and sentences. That's why you're on this podcast. So are people.
Yeah.
They just don't know it. And so when you bring to bear a thread that wove it all together, that's what I'm learning how to do, Steve, is how to tie that bow and close that moment where it's a packaged present now. Because when it's packaged and it's got a pretty bow, they feel good about sharing it and giving it away because they can, right? Ricky just tied the bow for me. Steve just tied the bow for me. Now I know how to present it. And that's the point I'm making, is that the better we thread those things together, not only do they understand it more and it impacts them more, you've now packaged it in such a way where they can do what you really want them to do. Hey, mom, listen to this. Hey, husband, listen to this. Hey, kids, listen to this. Hey, coworker, listen to this. Steve tied the bow. It's so simple. Here. And that's what I'm working on.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only Ricky Jenkins. I don't even know how to close a podcast after he just tied such an epic bow. But I hope for every one of you listening, you will just take what he just shared and you will go give it away to your people. Go inspire them, move them, and man, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Ricky Jenkins, thank you. I'm a big
Love
fan of you, and I'm grateful for your friendship, but just grateful for the way in which you bear witness to what is actually good and true and holy and noble. And his name is Christ. So, man, much love, bro. Thank you.
Bro. Encouraged by you, dude. Love you, man.
Well, thanks so much for tuning in to the Crafting Character podcast. And hopefully you can go download and check out Imagine by Carrington Gaines and Four City Worship. But also, man, Preaching Today, they have a ton of stellar articles that are just available. And they're doing such amazing stuff. I just saw that Steve Norman and is interviewing Mark Laberton, and such good content is there. Go check out PT. It's just amazing for your soul, for your study, for your prep. They got sermon ideas. It's just a space to spark. And especially during the holiday season, when you're looking for, man, what do I do during Lent? And what do I do during Good Friday? What do I do during Easter? Check out Preaching Today. Food for the Hungry, man, they are doing stellar work when it comes to many places that are forgotten for seeing in our world, and especially in Turkey and Syria right now. Go to fh.org. And if you ever got questions about Hope International University, they've got undergraduate preaching programs, biblical studies programs, master's programs, online programs. It's my alma mater. I'd love to tell you about it. You can always reach out to me at steve@steveryancarter.com, steve@steveryancarter.com. But my friends, may you take what you learned, put it into practice, and may you preach with a fire, with a conviction, with a sense that the Spirit is just stirring in and through you, calling people into the presence of the one true God. Much love, everyone. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Grace and peace.